Hi, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Intuitive Psychology, the podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jill Ritchie, and I'm joined by co-host and co-founder of Intuitive Psychology, Sarah Gregg. And today we have another epic guest with us, the wonderful Emily Elizabeth. Before I tell you about Emily Elizabeth, we actually connected with Emily Elizabeth when we were recently in New York and we had the most amazing conversation on her podcast. So we knew that we had to get her back today. So Emily Elizabeth is the founder of New York City's based boutique marketing agency, Loshattan Co, and the host of What Fulfills You. What Fulfills You is a podcast and intentional brand dedication to exploring what it truly means to design a fulfilling life through meaningful relationships, career growth, and overall wellness. Emily is a former elite skater and she brings a high performance mindset and creative vision to everything that she does. And since launching her business in 2020, What Fulfills You has grown beyond the podcast into a best-selling product line, including the What Fulfills You card game, daily journal, all designed to help you live with more purpose and intention. And we can vouch for that, Emily, because we were gifted your beautiful card game and your journal. So we know exactly how beautiful these products are. So welcome to the podcast, Emily Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to connect again after New York. It feels like you guys said, it feels like a while ago.
It really does. It really does. Emily, I just want to dive straight in, if that's okay, because you talk about fulfillment and high performance and like the mental discipline. But I think for a lot of listeners, it seems like two different sides of like this of the same coin. Like how do you connect fulfillment and high performance together, like in your work? Because I think that's something like we all kind of struggle to do. We can go in like the high performance mode, we're working like really, really hard, and then we kind of reach like that like burnout point or like the tiredness, and then we go down again. Like, how do you bridge the gap between those two concepts?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that I genuinely don't attach myself or my identity to what I do. And I think that's a big differentiator when I've been reflective myself as to why I am able to create fulfillment in that space and not lean into burnout. It's because even though as an entrepreneur, even though as, a former competitive figure skater and tennis player, I never found fulfillment in winning or just winning. To me, it was about, did I actually enjoy my practice? Did I enjoy my journey? Did I enjoy the people that celebrated with me when I was winning? And I think, which I believe I might have shared in our conversation when you were on my podcast, but for me, I really learned that lesson early on in life when I went through my first breakup and my first heartbreak in college. And I learned right then and there what it feels like to have different success. I was building a business at the time, going through that breakup. And I remember thinking like, wow, I'm making progress in this part of my life, but I feel really empty. I feel unfulfilled. And that's when I leaned into, I discovered Tony Robbins at that stage of my life. And I just started to understand a little bit more about the self and fulfillment and happiness and how you actually make that last. And so to me, I think it's very much understanding discipline and why you want to do something and understanding like the genuineness that it comes from, but also not attaching your identity and your self-worth to, okay, if I, get this much revenue in a month or in the year, or if I build this, only then am I worthwhile of XYZ. And I was able to separate that from an early age.
Mm,
Wow, that's incredible, especially being a competitive, someone in sports.
Mhm.
Like how, I know you were talking about like it's so important to when we have these things, but I don't, it doesn't feel the way it should. That's kind of an anomaly in that industry, right? Not to attach your worth to the achievement and actually ticking all those boxes. How challenging was that for you to to move into a different space and not have that sort of belief, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, well, I think it's so this is a funny way of looking at it too. When I was in early on in my skating career, I'm talking when I was like 6, 7 years old, I was winning a lot. Like I was consistently getting first place. And I share that because it's really relevant in the fact that I think um almost because I had a surplus of achieving that it wasn't the thing that I was seeking then. I think it's kind of like this the psychological effect of when you didn't have enough attention, you kind of want more of it. And so it's almost like because I knew that it was attainable, it wasn't the thing that I went seeking for because I wasn't lacking that. I wasn't lacking lack
Yeah.
of achievement. You know, I wasn't lacking, you know, like my parents' love or people looking up to me or admiring me. I knew that already existed, regardless of whether I was winning or not. And so I think that played a role. And I learned it more almost in like the personal development side and like life side outside of like work and sports. You know, I think I experienced that early on in life, which I kind of realized maybe not many people do unless you're in, you know, a high performing sports, especially as a kid. And so for me, like going through a breakup showed me that I am my own person with or without this guy. And I think that's how I was able to learn how to separate, which was almost like the final stage for me as an adult. Like, okay, I was already able to separate it in my sports life and in essence, like,
Mhm.
which translated really easily into work because those are both very like achieving types of things in life. But then you get to that stage of like, am I gonna get this relationship? Am I gonna find a guy that like, you know, wants to be with me? And I think I never had to go through it like that in the sense, but just going through your first breakup at the age of 20, you kind of learn this idea of, okay, just because we're not together doesn't mean I don't have my own life. It doesn't mean that I can't rebuild. And so I think that's how I was able to kind of make it a very like 360, you know, picture.
Mm.
That takes a discipline too, mental discipline, right? To understand and almost have that secure attachment style,
Mhm.
right? It sounds like, you know, I don't know all of your life story, but it sounds like there's a real security. You're very secure within yourself. Was
Mhm.
there a was there a rock bottom moment for you, Emily, where you were like, okay, I can't continue like this? Or, you know, most people have that moment of,
Yeah.
was there one of those moments for you that changed the trajectory of your life?
Totally. And it's funny because I always feel like I only use this example, but it really was that breakup. And I think for more context, I was living in California at the time. I'm originally from the East Coast, so that's 3,000 miles away from home. I'm a sophomore in college. We were living together. This guy was 2 years older than me. He was about to graduate from university. I was still in school, and we had a dog together. So we're sharing an apartment, and he just graduated. And then, you know, at the time, I was just a really, believe it or not, just very underdeveloped person. And look, I was only 20, so I know everyone's always like, you know, you're just a kid. And that is true. But I think I look back and I remember this guy was really stable and really secure. And, you know, there came a point where he had to walk away from the relationship because I wasn't showing healthy attributes in a partner. You know, I was very codependent. I was very insecure in myself, actually. So it was a 180 from there because he leaves the relationship during, you know, a stage of my life. I ended up transferring universities. But again, like, he left, he moved back home to San Diego, and I'm in this apartment that we were once sharing. We have 1.5 months left on this lease together, and I'm taking care of our dog, and I'm 20 years old. I don't have friends to go to. They can't really relate to the situation because most college relationships are not like that. You kind of are not living together. So I think that for me was my turnaround because I felt so lonely and I felt what it felt like to feel like you don't have a sense of self. And I think that's what made me really curious about, wait a second, this is alarming. And this guy actually, when he broke up with me, he said to me, Emily, you know, go and he was very gentle about it. He's like, go and find something for yourself again. You know, maybe consider going back to skating or just practicing again. Like he made that nudge towards like clearly showing like, hey, you're almost too into this relationship and you don't like have your sense of self anymore and you're only 20, you're still in college, like go and pour into that. And he knew, like, because he was very stable and secure himself. And so I did that turned around my life and I kind of realized, oh wow, this is partially what a lot of women kind of go through at times, especially when they haven't developed that sense of self. I just happened to kind of hit that really early on in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And then talk about, so you've kind of referenced as well, like the entrepreneurial side, so
Yeah.
you started like really young. I think like like we'd read that you started like, was it like skating costumes that you kind of
Mhm.
like made from a really young age?
Yeah.
Like, tell us about that journey to become an entrepreneur. Like, why has that always appealed to you and been part of you?
Yeah, I have an older brother who is about 8 years older than me, and I think when I was younger, when I was like 10, he was about to go to college, and I'd be seeing the entrepreneur magazines get delivered to our house, and I think he had a monthly subscription, and I just started to get curious about it because he was curious about it, and he was always interested in it, and I think my parents immigrating to the U.S. from Vietnam made me curious as well because they just have that classic immigrant mentality of kind of work hard, you build something for yourself. And I think that started when back in the day when I was playing around on the internet, I learned what eBay was at the time. And my mom was creating my custom figure skating dresses when I was younger. But as most teenagers go, we often think we can do things better than some of our parents. And so I was 17 at the time. I had a knack and business savviness because I used to answer some of my mom's emails. And I just decided, hey, I want to start like this, but my own version of it. And she was like, well, if you really think you can, then just go ahead. Like almost like betting, like, oh, come on, like you don't really know what it takes. But it was a little bit easier at that stage because really it's I didn't have to pour a lot of money into making dresses. It's a custom made to order, right? So I get an order, then I use that money to go and invest and like make the product. And I was
Mhm.
using eBay at the time. So it's not like I needed to create a Shopify website or anything like that. It was just already like easy e-commerce. So that era made it really easy to like get into it. And then in college was when I got really business savvy, started to put it into stores, things like that, where like ice skating stores where the rinks are, they always have these things called like a pro shop where they sell like gloves and skating gear, So I ended up going during my junior year during the breakup. I was like, I'm going to find something to focus on. And that was what I ended up focusing on. I was like, I'm going to like make this a thing. I want to make this a real business and start to put into stores. So that's how that started. But over the years too, I remember thinking it was a great start in business. It was successful, very niche. But I knew after about 6 years that it wasn't something I wanted to do long term, which is what kind of got me into, media and podcasting and of course my marketing agency because then I grew up in the social media era, which again was just kind of luck of the draw.
Yeah. So how do you get like, so you're in New York, like busy kind of lifestyle, big ambitions and kind of dreams. Like what are your daily practices to maintain that like mental discipline and
Mhm.
still bring in that sense of fulfillment? Like what do you do on a daily basis?
I always focus on pouring into myself. And I think a lot of people kind of forget that on a day to day, or it's easy to forget like what that looks and feels like, and actually sitting with yourself and thinking, what do I actually want to do? Like, what actually makes me excited, right? It could be getting coffee with a friend, it could be something like that. So, scheduling that out in the week and having that to look forward to. It could also be for me, like going to do a skating practice session, just doing what I used to do, doing that for 1 hour, getting physical movement and also tapping into the inner child part of my life. Other ways I do is just like long walks or listening to music like jazz. Like it really changes, but I think I focus on the thing that inner Emily loves. And like you can't go wrong because there is no wrong answer when you pour into the young child
Mhm.
in you that just enjoys that thing. And I think that looks different for everyone, but I think it's almost like it's very common as adults, like we go into adult life and we just are go 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 and forget the power of feeding that little joy because it sparks and compounds into other areas of life.
hmm So that's kind of the fulfillment side. How do you maintain that discipline then to like continue with your goals and dreams, like specifically around like in business?
Mhm.
it's not all plain sailing. Like we can speak to that. Like, we've run our own businesses for like 7+ years, and there are seasons in business where you're flying high and everything that you touch turns to gold, and it's like the complete Midas touch. And then there are other seasons in business where it requires you to really dig deep and like find a lot of resilience, because it can be a lonely journey. And I know a lot of our listeners, they might be thinking about starting a business, they might be like a similar age to you, or maybe kind of like at the later kind of end of their careers, and they might be
Yeah.
thinking, oh, like, how do I keep going? Like, when I feel those challenges, talk to us a little bit about some of those challenges, like that resilience, and how you keep that mental discipline and high performance focus.
This might sound funny, but I actually compare. I actually compare myself to people, especially it's very easy to in New York. For me in particular, I like to compare myself to people that are within like similar age range and have already accomplished more than me. And why I
Mm.
do that is because I guess it's easy for me to do because I don't feel insecure about comparing myself, number one. So I'm already secure in myself enough to like look at other people and see what are they doing that I'm not doing that has gotten them there. And I
Yeah.
think the second part to that is for me that sometimes like lights a fire under me on a daily basis because like to your point as entrepreneurs it can be very lonely. It can also feel isolating at times. You don't have like at least for me like I don't have coworkers or anything to kind of always feed energy off of. And so it is very easy to like sometimes wake up and not feel like it. It's not like I have something specific to be at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. Like some of the people I see in New York, they're like going to their office, right? And so I think that's how I keep like this disciplined mindset of, hey, there are people that have done the thing that you want to do, or they're beyond that point. It means it's possible. Like that's one aspect of the mental discipline. And when I think of that, then it rushes me to, all right, put it in your calendar. Like, what time are you going to get up this week? Then I start to schedule things. That's, I think, the second part to my discipline is that I schedule things out in my calendar and I do it ahead of time, like an appointment, so that I don't miss it. So I like to go to my workouts, usually like 7 a.m. I plan it out a week ahead. It's in my calendar, like an appointment. There's often when I'm booking classes through ClassPass, like there is a fee if you miss the class or if you cancel. So I like that kind of accountability, but just like committing to like adding it into your calendar, signing up for the class, like to me, that's what has helped me keep the discipline and like actually, all right, you're waking up at 6, you're going to this at 7, you're going to get your day going by 9:30 or 10. Like that's kind of like my process.
Oh, I love that you said that. So funny. We were talking about
We're
this
literally
today.
talking about
Oh, really?
scheduling
We're
today.
literally talking about scheduling because I feel like Sarah and I, we've in the beginning with intuitive psychology, and again with seasons, there's busier seasons, but we built it with the mindset of having space for us to really enjoy presence and peace. And that is so beautiful, and we are so grateful that we get to do that. But we were talking today about habits are so good for
Yeah.
driving momentum and manifesting, right? Because sometimes when it's in flows, like Sarah's an expert in flow, she's written a book about it, right? So flow state is so great, and it gets into that, gets those creative juices flowing, but it's really blending the masculine and the feminine energy because both are so equally important. The
Mhm.
feminine is that space to, to connect, to get present, to
Mhm.
create from. That's creation, right? It's activating intuition with that beautiful energy. But then we need to do something with it, and that's where when we can apply the insights, the intuition, all of those things that come through, they need to be applied more from the masculine space of discipline. And the masculine energy can really hold that feminine energy and drive those creative ideas and things forward, because if not, it's just kind of, we don't know where we're going. Peace
Yeah.
and love and space is all gorgeous, but we are naturally creators and we are limitless to what we can create. So it is important, back to your point, it is important to schedule, to have some
Mhm.
sort of discipline
Yeah.
And you know that word can be a bit off-putting for people, but discipline doing what you love. So like you
Yeah.
said, scheduling in the gym, scheduling in a walk, it's an
Yeah.
appointment, and then suddenly it's important. We're adding
Yeah.
value to it. It's not just, oh, do you know, I might go walk today, and then do you know what happens? It's like, oh, it's getting late now and it's dark. I'm not going to bother. But
Yeah.
it feels like you're achieving something as well. It's in the diary. I did that. There's some sense of achievement from a mindset and a bodily energetic perspective as well. And
Yeah.
that's where those ideas start to land. We have those conversations, you know,
Mhm.
new things come into our awareness, and then we're in the action orientated space to start
Yeah.
moving forward and getting stuff done. I love that. I think it's so important, Emily.
I was gonna say too, like as you bring that up, I think about how like I genuinely want to always honor both that balance of masculine and feminine energy. And I think the way that I do it is in very small details. Like if I'm gonna do, let's say, an hour long walk on the weekend, I might invite a friend, and that's like catch up time too. And that's how I merge the two. Like, yes, it's scheduled, like, hey, let's do our walk at 10 a.m. But then I bring a friend in, or we make it like a coffee and a walk. And so you still kind of get that slower, you know, kind of more nurturing pace, if you will. But then, and you're with a girlfriend, you get to talk and you get to be in that feminine space, but you're also disciplining yourself by getting that movement in, scheduling it ahead of time, and also like creating structure for that. So I think sometimes when people don't know how to see the blend of those two, I always try to share like, hey, you can actually bring both in. It's just a matter of like how you frame it.
Mm-hmm. And what about visualization? Like, do you use that at all in any of your practices? Because I know like elite kind of athlete sports, like visualization is huge. And from a psychology perspective and even within our techniques at the Intuitive Psychology Association, you know, we take a lot of like principles like imagery scripting that we find in kind of like with elite athletes, like really thinking about their performance, but not just the thought, like, but the feeling, like, and what they're going to hear and that really embodied experience. And we know from the science that that really helps, like, the manifestation of the process. Like, is that something that you have kind of like taken from your sports into the mental discipline side of things?
Definitely. And I think how I apply it is very much two parts. I actually, on a weekly basis, I'm always visualizing like how I feel when I'm doing something, or how I feel when I'm podcasting, for example, or how I feel when I land a new client, or how I feel when I'm doing that work, you know? And I sit with it for a while. And I kind of actually don't really like sit and think about it, but I kind of often visualize when I'm walking. When I'm on a long walk, that's how I feel connected to this, like visualizing, like, you know, how do I look? How do I feel? Like, you know, who am I working with? And how does that all make me feel? I think that's one aspect of my visualization process. But I think the second part to that is I'm always writing affirmations that are like to literally plant that seed in my head. And I did that when I left my first and only corporate job after college before starting my marketing agency. I remember I took 4 months till I finally, well, 4 months till I actually left my job from the time I started to think about, okay, I want to leave this job. And it was only a 3 week window from the time I actually seriously applied myself and got my first client, or actually my first two clients. And I remember the difference was actually a little bit of that discipline, but also visualizing what it looks and feels like, and actually writing it down as if it had already happened. And I
Mm.
remember the effect of that, because you write something down and plant something in your head so much, you guys know psychologically, like you just start to believe it. And I'm very much a believer of what you plant in your mind is what you create. And so I'm also very careful with that too, the words that I write down, the words that I speak, you know, the way the micro details I'm talking on a daily basis, like that feeds my mind. And so I'm very careful too, because I learned that especially from my sports life. You know, if I was playing a seeded number one player, and I luckily had an amazing dad, and he still is this way, where if I'm playing someone, he never ever allowed me to have doubt that I could win, you know, even if I was coming in unseeded. Like there was that kind of foundation as like a 10-year-old, 12-year-old. So you go through the rest of your life having very little doubt in that sense of like, oh, like I can't do that. I'm not that kind of person, you know, but like you, and again, sometimes I still get like in my own head, of course, right? You start to think, wait, who am I to like be this person or to do this person? But you, again, if, depending on what works best for you, you write that down and saying, I am X. Like you write it down, not for a future tense, but like tapping into that present, I am this type of person.
Mhm.
Anchoring that in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I just want to say as well, just especially for anyone listening, to know, like you've talked about like your family and that really secure attachment and like that belief that's been really kind of like breathed into you, and it's
Oh,
such a beautiful experience, you know, and I'm sure a lot of parents listening to this will even like take up some tips as to like maybe how they can do that with their children. But like I grew up in a family where that didn't happen. Like that
Mm-hmm.
didn't happen, do you know? So it was like fearful and doubt. And it was like when you went to go kind of above the edge or push yourself out of your comfort zone, it was like kind of like a Celtic thing, I think. You know, it was like, oh God, oh no, don't do that. Like, oh, what if you fail? Like, what if you hurt yourself? Oh, what if it doesn't work out? So that was very much kind of like breathed into me. But I want to say that you can still overcome that. Like your conditioning, like regardless of like what you've come through, there'll be more trials and tribulations to do that, like undoubtedly. But those mental constructs that you have and those fears that you've internalized, what Emily's describing is a really great way to help like reconstruct the reality because it's just an illusion. Like it's just an illusion. And I remember being like so focused, like I focus so much on my goals and like my intentions and what it is that I want to do that when someone asks me, what if it doesn't work out? I can't visualize it. Like I can't even feel it in my body. Like that's when I know I'm in a really strong mental place. Like when someone goes, well, what if you fail? And I'm like, it's not even a reality for me. Like it's just not a possibility. So the practices that we're describing, like these are techniques that also like me and Jill have used to really like help us like strengthen that mental discipline because it's ultimately a muscle, you know, and some of us are raised in environments where that muscle is stronger and it's been developed over time. And other of us are maybe like working from a different capacity, but it doesn't mean that it's not possible. It doesn't mean
agree.
it's not possible.
Oh, I could
Yeah.
not agree more. I feel like it, environment does play a big part. So let's acknowledge that, if you're
Yeah.
around a lot of people that are naysayers and like negative, it takes some amount of grit to shut out that noise.
Yeah.
But I think again, talking to that part, you don't need to do it all at once. And going back to Emily's point, like seeing someone else that's done it, that should be evidence to go, well, I can do it. Okay, so maybe someone's had different, upbringing from you in different circumstances, but it is possible, but it takes time, it takes discipline. And if you
Yeah.
don't start, you'll never move forward. And I think it's just like taking that step and that compound effect, building on top of it and building on top of it, but don't stop. It's
Yeah.
when you stop, and that's the thing. People are like, yeah, I did that and it worked. Yeah, but if you stop, it won't work. It's like going to the gym, getting the really beautiful lean body that you've desired, and then
Mhm.
not going for a year and going, oh, look what's happened to me. Yeah, because it's the exact same thing. You don't just do it for a few months and expect it to stop, expect it to keep going. It is
Mhm.
like it is that discipline, but what a beautiful discipline to have. Like
Yeah.
to know that you are completely in control of that. Like that you get to do that for yourself. You're not actually relying on someone else handing you
Mhm.
the keys to your
Yeah.
future. It's like I have complete power and control over that, and that is so empowering, right?
Absolutely. And I actually want to share too, I think the interesting part of my upbringing foundation is that I had one parent that never instilled doubt, and I did have another parent that also was more fearful and a lot much, yeah. So I had both existing, and I think when I was younger, the comment that made me, and I remind myself a lot too, if I ever notice I'm falling into that mental like trap of believing what someone else is saying, my brother, my older brother, he used to tell me, you let things get to your head too easily. And I was super young at the time. Keep in mind, I'm like 8 years younger than him. So I remember thinking, oh, I think that's actually so true. I don't want that to be the case. And it would be stuff that one of my parents would say. And I think he kind of saw how like easy it got to my head, how easy it was for me to believe what they think or what they say. And so I was lucky to have one parent that always held that you absolutely can do it. You can absolutely win this match. And not in a delusional, oh, I'm so supportive of you, but very much like I believe and trust that you have the skills to do what you need to do, out in the match or whatever. And on the other hand, the parent that instilled the fear and sometimes still does too, I realized and which is why for those who are listening who are parents, it is so profound now as a 20-some-year-old to like look back and see the impact of having just one parent that spoke not like random positivity, but applicable, positive, and affirmative words of like, you don't ever need to doubt yourself. Yeah, it is really powerful. It's some stuff that I've been thinking about as I consider, years from now, maybe if I have children or whatever, like these are things I would like to copy from, my dad, who was always very, very mindful of what he was speaking to me. And I think I realized too that what other people say about me or towards me, they're always speaking through their own lens and their own filter of their own fears and their own programming. And I don't have to choose to subscribe to that. Like I hear it, but it is a choice. That's the mental discipline part I perceive, which is the moment you receive that information from them, you get to pause and choose, do I accept that or do I ignore that, or do I compartmentalize and put that elsewhere, and that's the practice. That is a mental practice of like my own mental workout, like it is like
Yeah.
night and day. And you do need that, I think, when you pursue any kind of entrepreneurial endeavor or something where you're putting yourself out on the line. You need to build that muscle, and there's different ways to practice for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Do you know, it kind of brings to mind one of our graduates recently, she spoke, she's incredible. She's came and trained with us in one of our like previous cohorts, and she's an actress. She's been in the public eye, Sarah Jane Dunn. She was an actress here in the UK on TV. And she's become like a real icon of like female empowerment. So like she's done our training, but she spoke at an event recently, and it was a female empowerment event. She got incredible feedback. Like we actually had people messaging us because she talked about intuitive psychology as part of it. So we had like random people messaging us saying, "Oh my goodness, like I've met Sarah Jane Dunn, like her talk was amazing, like this is fascinating." And during it, she was talking about pole and like pole dancing. She was just in her exercise gear, kind of like showing pole as an example of it. And someone caught like one of the organizers or someone senior in the building complained that it was like
Pornographic.
inappropriate and pornographic. Like,
Oh,
yeah. And again, it's that filter. It's recognizing like but how she did that because she could see that's someone else's projection.
yeah.
That is someone else's projection on me. That's got nothing to do with me. And so she took that, and rather viewing it as a negative, she went online and she spoke about it on social media, and the outpouring of support for her and the organization, because they ended up being banned from this like event,
Yeah,
has
they
been
actually got
incredible.
banned. They
They
got
got
banned from the
banned.
event. And the event organizer, Wild and Wild, they have been working at that event down in England for 2 years, and thought they had a good relationship. And they said with immediate effect, basically, you're not welcome back. It's, crazy, crazy. And
It is
yeah,
just those projections, but like you said, you need that level of self-awareness to recognize and actually to stop the story like
Yeah.
coming into your being. Like you
Mhm.
literally have to like put your hand up almost like, like and go, no, like
Yeah.
you don't belong to me. This is not my responsibility to hold. This is your projection of your stuff, and you get to take it back. And I think that does take real strength, but it does take a huge amount of self-awareness because it's so easy to be triggered. Like we all, regardless of who we are, like we have a deep desire to be liked, and to be
love.
accepted and loved and belonged, and you don't
Yeah.
ever want to kind of like, it's hard when you face criticism, but it's also a natural part. And I think it is just knowing
What's
when is it
mine?
feedback that I need to receive, and also when is it a projection of someone else's stuff.
I
Mm.
love that, Sarah. And I think, that when people often, I've seen this a lot when someone will say, shame on you. And I
Mm.
think, don't put your shame on me. That's your shame. I see it thrown at shame on you. What? That's your, don't put your shame on
Yeah,
me.
so
And I
true.
think it is that, first probably the reaction is, oh, in your stomach, you're like, oh, but actually taking that pause and, just almost regulating your nervous system to say, I won't do what I've maybe done before and
Hmm.
shrink because and understanding, as Sarah was saying, like what's not mine to hold and energetically as well, giving it back because the body does have reactions to these things, right? It goes into fight or flight and it's like but
Mhm.
actually having those pause and self-regulation and being
Hmm.
able to just hold your own, especially as women
Mhm.
in this space. And this isn't about, bashing men. I think men are incredible and they have their own challenges, but it's sometimes women against other women, and that's what you tend
Yeah.
to see a lot of, women against other women, and that's a huge thing. And for you, a young, you 27, did you say?
Yeah, 28, 28.
28, right? So
Uh-huh.
28, you've achieved so much. And there probably will be so many women that support you. And, Sarah and I are massive champions of women in this space. But there will probably be people that are like, oh, who does she think she is? And what is she doing? Especially to achieve so much and, create your own marketing agency and your podcast and all of these things that you've done even from childhood. So having that resilience, just want to say well done, first of all, to be in your authenticity and to have the courage to lead
Mhm.
as a woman in this space at such a young age. There's going to be a lot of people that are probably deeply inspired by you as well.
Mm. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I certainly have experienced both. I think I've experienced both people that have admired and cheered me on, and certainly others who kind of either quietly or not so quietly were like, because I started podcasting right after I graduated from college. And so
Mm.
I was really, it was about 5 years ago. And so, early on, looking back, I sometimes think like, if anything now, I have almost like this belief of like, how was I doing that at, 22 years old? And, whereas back then I was like, no, I definitely have learned a lot. I've navigated a lot and I would love to share this. It was always just coming
Mhm.
from a place of if this could help one other person, because I really wanted that when I was going through my breakup, going through college, and just learning more about myself as a woman. If I could help, a younger sister per se, I would love that. And that's really my focus and my goal. And I think I've learned it's okay if other people think or say this about me. I don't have to soak that in. I don't have to allow that to come into my head and become part of my belief system.
Yeah, amazing. So tell us about the cards, the card game. Like, where did the idea for that come and like what does it involve?
Yeah, it started. I knew that I wanted to always create merch for What Fulfills You podcast. I remember this was like Christmas 2020, and my friend said to me, you're always asking such deep questions. Do you ever think about creating a card game that's kind of connected to your podcast? And that is what sparked the idea for me. I was like, yeah, that would actually be kind of interesting. And so I ended up, I think, on a Word document, I would write out like every day, I would write out like 2 or 3 questions. And I would do like over 100 questions so that I would narrow it down when I came to create the card game. And again, looking back, I'm not sure how I did this, like where I went to find a manufacturer, I went to, design, I designed everything myself because I didn't have the
Wow.
money. I did it on Canva. Like I very much designed, I designed the
Beautiful.
whole thing by myself, the colors and everything. And that's why to me, I'm
Wow.
like, there's probably some things I would like edit now, but this was me right around 23 years old creating this card game. And it really just stemmed from number one, something I do myself is asking a lot of inquisitive questions with my friends or strangers, obviously on the podcast as well, but also recognizing at that time, and this was like also slowly post COVID era, I was like, I wish there was more of this. I
Mm.
wish more people could be nudged a little bit to have that deeper conversation or have the more meaningful conversation. And I know that's helped me a lot when I would ask these types of questions with people and peers and friends, or even on dates or whatever, like wine nights with friends. And I just saw the impact of that. So I very much was like, all right, how can I turn this into a card game? And from there, I obviously saw the market for even separating it from the podcast and
Mhm.
making it more of like an entity in itself. So it's, you know, in boutique stores, that kind of thing. But of course, it's very much well connected to the personal growth aspect of what fulfills you.
Mm,
Gorgeous.
congratulations
Gorgeous.
as
Yeah,
well, and
huge
having it
congratulations.
in stores and things, and it just shows you, you know, you haven't let any outside influence
Mm.
impact you and what you've created as a byproduct of that. You know,
Yeah.
just really being in your space of, I know it almost feels with you, Emily, that it's like you expect it. It's like a non-negotiable. Oh, I know it's going to work. I know it's going
Yeah,
to happen. And
yeah.
again, there's no coincidence we're talking about this. We were talking about this today as well. So this is just such a beautiful synchronicity having this conversation, because I think there is an element of we can get really trapped in our story, and we
Mhm.
need to really, again, going back to your point around language, being so mindful of the language, because we can fall into habits of complaining or
Mhm.
moaning. And, you know, life is life. We're human. We're allowed to be pissed off and have moments. You know, I certainly do have them. I'm doing a house renovation just now. Sarah knows. Everyone probably knows. I'm always, but I had a little check-in with myself today when I was speaking to Sarah, and I was like, I need to be really mindful of what I'm saying, because it can really leak into other parts of almost going into a little bit of victimhood. Oh, why is this
Mhm.
happening? Why am I having these problems with my house? And it kind of spills into other areas. And the reality is, it's just stuff. It's just
Mhm.
happening. And that is when having mental discipline is so important. So getting out of the house and making it as best as I can. And for anyone that's going through any challenges, it is, you know, we're not saying bypass anything. It's so important. We talk a lot about feeling our emotions, because if not, they get stuck and trapped in the body. And that's a whole
Mhm.
other podcast episode in itself. But also give yourself that window to feel, but also start to move,
Yeah.
start to change the energy, you know, start to really lean into the simple practices of gratitude, because there's a hell of a lot to be
Mhm.
really, really grateful for.
Mm.
And I definitely had a little word with myself today, because I'm like, hey, gosh, like this could be leaking into other parts of a
Yeah.
story that's not actually true, you
Yeah,
know?
we both did. We both did. I think it was like, in fact, the conversation was about getting back to basics, do you know, because we do like a huge amount of like, deep, like depth work within like the Intuitive Psychology Association. It's a lot that we kind of talk about. And like those deeper practices are so incredibly powerful, like in our toolkit for our coaches that we train, to the highest level in the industry, but also like on that personal level. But the basics matter. Like, I think sometimes we can get trapped in like, doing like the deeper work, or like having the somatic release, or going to your yoga, or having a one-to-one with your coach. But actually, like, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis? Like, how are
Mhm.
you speaking to yourself? What are you thinking about? Are you visualizing? Are you making that time for yourself?
Are you eating well? Are
Are
you
you eating
drinking
well? Are you
enough
drinking your
water?
water?
Are you
Like,
drinking your water? You know, are you having too much refined sugar? You know,
Yeah.
all of these things. It's like, whoa, have a little check-in. And sometimes we just
Mhm.
need to give ourselves a little kick up the butt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also like what kind of information you're allowing to feed your mind, right? I think that one is an easy one that we all overlook. And you know, I tell everyone all the time, like, even though I'm like that Gen Z millennial on the brink, like I've still to this day, I've never scrolled on TikTok. I have the platform for business purposes, but I've never like I just never hit that era of like curiosity. So I've been very lucky to not have those distractions, but I do think that's one big difference that I've noticed between my friends and I when they're always talking about like, did you see this on the news or did you see this and whatever? And while I think it's important to be aware of certain things, you also have to question, is this feeding me in a way that makes me feel good? You know, does this make me feel attuned to myself? Do I even feel
Yeah.
myself when I'm like watching this kind of stuff or listening to this kind of stuff? And that goes into your body and then like how you
Yeah.
feel, you tighten, you get stressed, you know? And so that's why I talk about the movement stuff, the walks, and, you know, again, like the discipline of like doing that workout, but you can make it more fun and soft and feminine. And the girly way that I like to do is like, all right, let's go get a coffee and do like a 4 mile walk with a friend, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like you get excited for that. You know, you feel it in your body, like, wow, I'm so excited. Saturday morning, going to
Love
walk with my best friend, you know? So I think small things like that compound if you do them week by week or even daily. And that could shift out of some of the things that we're not doing on the healthy side.
I love that.
Definitely. I
We're
think
just
that
about to start a challenge, aren't we, Sarah, with our
we are.
membership? We were talking about this today. So when this comes out, it's actually the day that we've got our call with our members. So we're just about to start a challenge. So they're going to get to find out what that is. And it is all around very similar things that we're talking about because it is the basics, but there's nothing basic about it for what it actually does for us
Yeah.
mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, you know, all of these things. It's so, so important and that mental mindset. Um, I just want to touch on your marketing agency. And I'd love you to tell us a bit more about that because, you know, we hear a lot like marketing agencies and there's lots of different variations of them. Tell us about your marketing agency and what you do and the typical clients that you would tend to work with.
Yeah, so the clients we work with now are primarily luxury boutique hotels. And so some of them are not necessarily boutique, but like Le Meridian, for example, in New York. I know they have a few of them, but one of those locations is in our portfolio. And we now directly partner with hospitality groups where then we work with a lot of their hotels. But how I got into it, it's funny because I did an internship in college where I was working for another boutique marketing agency, and they were this is like 2018, 2019 era where they were already starting influencer partnerships, influencers with hotels. And I remember I was like behind the scenes on that, learning. And then I remember leaving that internship. I was like, I love digital marketing. I think this is what I thought I wanted to do, but it's a little too slow for me. It just wasn't my pace. After college, I went to work in corporate sales, learned a lot, applied a lot of skills in my sales job to entrepreneurship. And then down the road, I remember thinking, wow, all of college living in California, especially in that time, there was YouTube and content creators were like blowing up in Southern California, especially Los Angeles. And that used to be, I think, a big hub. And I was living over there at that time. So I was inspired by some of my peers or some of my friends that were already living off of YouTube full time. And they were my age. And I didn't even meet them in college. Like they were just friends from mutual friends, but they were like, it'd be a girl that was like 21 years old living off of YouTube full time, and I was like, oh wow, I guess I could do this too, because I was just seeing what it looked like. But I think all that to say, growing up timing wise in the social media era, playing around with Instagram when I was in college and when I wanted to be a travel blogger, but just again, like kind of like anything in life, your first few years in a job, you have to kind of gain the skills and you get better to, rise to the ladder or whatever. To me, it was the same thing. It was just years during college of playing around and doing social media and doing it as an intern and doing it essentially for free, right? And then down the road, I was like, wait, I've accumulated all of these skill sets. I have the business savviness. Why don't I just see if this works in the market and see if someone would want to hire me or my agency to help them with their social media strategy, their content, their just full account management, and then of course influencer partnerships. And so started out, had my first client in New York, and then it just slowly took off from there. And over the past 3 years, it's only been client referrals, which has been really awesome and very
Amazing.
validating. But I think it was just me combining like my business skill set and also with the things that I was playing with as a college kid. And I think that's something people forget too is, a lot of the things that you do, whether in your free time as a hobby, or even like again if you're someone's young and in college or in school, you just never know all those years that accumulate into make improving this skill. You very much can take it on and like teach someone else or do something with it and have your own business or even side, you can make money off of the skill that you've accumulated for those years for free,
Definitely. Yeah, we
so
say
that's
that a
what it
lot
was.
to like people who come and like want to train with us, it can feel like they're maybe like senior leaderships or like corporate or they're in that career transition phase and it can feel like this huge identity shift or loss where it's like, oh, but I'm going into this, but actually it's just that accumulation, it's the coming
Uh-huh.
together. It's not it's not a big change. Like what you learn throughout your career, you bring with you into that next iteration, whether it's your personal journey and what you've navigated, whether it's the professional skills that you've got from managing a team, from, like speaking, holding presentations, all of that comes together. And I think we can miss that. Like we miss opportunities because we keep ourselves in that box and we go, like, who am I to do it? But I love the reframe that you've given throughout, which is, it's not if you see other people doing it, that's your permission slip. That's like, well, if they can do it, like it shows me that it is possible. And I love that. This has been such a
I
brilliant conversation,
know.
Emily.
So good.
If people want to connect with you, like what's the best way to kind of like find the podcast or find you?
Yeah, so the podcast What Fulfills You is on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, any podcast platform. Just search that there. And my personal Instagram is at Emily E. Duong. Duong is spelled Duong.
Yeah, and I have to say, if you
Amazing.
go and check out Emily's Instagram, it is next level visually stunning.
That, yeah,
You'll just scroll forever. It's like looking at a
it's
magazine.
it's so beautiful. And Emily, just before you go, I want to ask you, like, what's next for you? What is the dream? Like, because you've done so much already. I feel like we're going to see you somewhere in like 5 years and we're going to
Yeah.
be like, hey, like you're going to, yeah, what is the dream for you?
For me, I'd say my current dream is to take my podcast to the next level. It's something that I feel really deeply connected with. It's like, the impact and the women that I get to share with is something that I really find like just deeply profound in my purpose. So that's something I'm looking forward towards over the next 2 years, just taking it to another level and seeing where that goes.
How exciting. How exciting. We cannot wait to see this journey unfold. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been amazing.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.